part 2. I'll just resume teaching in one moment. Part 2. Is the part 2 up on Facebook, on YouTube? Yes, okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, where was I? Okay, so we're discussing how the last set of fasts that the sages of a community would decree because the community is confronted with a calamity, and how those fasts are more stringent than the ones that come before. And the difference is that on these days, in addition to all the earlier stringencies, they sound the alarm and they lock the stores. They sound the alarm and lock the stores. And the Gemara asks, with what do they sound the alarm? And Rabbi Yehuda said, with shofarot. And Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel bar Shelat, said, in the name of Rav, with the Anenu prayer. Now, we've been talking about the Anenu prayer. This is the special prayer that is added to the Amidah, the daily prayer, the standing prayer, that's said every day. And we add this special blessing to it, a prayer and a blessing that's added when there is a fast day. And we were discussing when an individual takes on a fast, can he say the Anenu prayer? For sure, we add the Anenu prayer when it's a communal fast. Now, when they say sounding the alarm, is reciting the Anenu prayer like sounding the alarm? Well, we've already said that we have already added the Anenu prayer in these earlier fast days. So if these late fast days are more stringent than the ones that come before, why would saying the Anenu prayer be an enhanced stringency, a greater stringency, something added to the observance of that fast day? We've already been saying that on these earlier fast days. So perhaps it makes more sense that sounding the shofar is what the sages mean by sounding the alarm, as well as locking the stores. Now, the Gemara analyzes the dispute. It might enter our mind to say that the one who said that the community sounds the alarm by reciting Anenu, and this is Rav, he did not say that they cry out with the shofars, and likewise, the one who said that they cry out with shofars on these extra fast days, these later fast days, that the one who said sounding the alarm means sounding the shofars, that was Rav Yehuda, that he did not say that they sound the alarm by reciting Anenu, the Anenu prayer. But isn't it taught in a baraisa, the court does not decree fewer than 7 fasts on the community, which include 18 acts of sounding the alarm, right? So we have another baraisa that talks that when the court adds these later fast days, there's no less than 7 of them, and it includes sounding the alarm. And the mnemonic for this matter is Jericho. And as there were many episodes of sounding the shofars in Jericho, right? You should remember Jericho and how sounding the shofar brought the walls of Jericho tumbling down. So this is a conclusive refutation of the one who said that according to the opinion of Rav, they sound the alarm only by reciting Anenu. Anenu means answer us, Lord, Anenu. Rather, the Gemara explains that the dispute must be understood differently. With regard to shofarot, the sounding of shofars, everyone, i.e. Rav and Rav Yehuda, agree that the Mishna calls this sounding the alarm. When they disagree, it is with regard to the Anenu prayer. One sage, Rav, holds that this also is called sounding the alarm, and the other sage, Rav Yehuda, holds that reciting Anenu is not referred to as sounding the alarm. It's a good thought, right? You think about this. Why would they ever say that reciting a prayer equals sounding the alarm? Because they were living at a higher spiritual level than we are living. We should become accustomed to think that way. Like when something's going wrong in life, you're going to take action, right? This is called doing your shtadlus, right? Your shtadlus, meaning that you do your part. If you're sick, you take the medicine, you visit the doctor. If there's an emergency coming at the road, you swerve with the steering wheel. No one's saying don't take action that is within your power to take. But in addition to whatever action you're going to do, whatever is your role, whatever you can do as a human being to avert catastrophe, in addition to that, inherently tied to that, you appeal to God. Sounding the alarm is praying to God, right? In addition to whatever else we're doing. You should always think, if something's going wrong, ask God for help. It's like it ought to be instinctive for us. All right, so the Gemara comments, if so, then it follows that according to the one who said that they sound the alarm by reciting the Anenu prayer, all the more so they can sound the alarm with shofars, by blasting the shofars. But according to the one who said that they sound the alarm by blasting the shofar, this is the way they sound the alarm. However, they may not do so with Anenu, with the prayer, i.e., the community does not sound the alarm by reciting this prayer. And this indicates that the Anenu prayer is recited only in extreme cases, as it is a greater form of petitioning to God than blowing the shofar. That's where we are. Let me just turn this off. Where we are in this analysis, that's not where the law came out, right? We recite that Anenu prayer anytime there's a public fast day. Now, the Gemara, even when it's in commemoration of something in the past, we say Anenu. But when we're talking about there's a danger in front of the community right now, right? They say Anenu. Do they blast a shofar? That's sounding the alarm, and that seems to be a feature of the later fast days. So the Gemara raises a difficulty against this conclusion. But isn't it taught in a Baraisa, and with regard to all other types of calamities, other than drought, that break out? For example, and now we have a list of the kinds of calamities that the sages, were familiar with in ancient times and which would lead to a community declaring a series of fasts. So here is a sort of painful but incisive look at how they lived in the ancient world and what sorts of calamities would befall them and lead to these communal fasts. Examples: scabs, meaning boils that ooze pus on the skin. Locusts. We saw that just in the last couple of years, right? Where massive swarms of locusts descended on certain countries and regions of Africa and just ate all the crops. Fast, like in a matter of days, all the food was gone from that land. Imagine in an agrarian society where all the food in the field is just gone. It's been eaten. It's a huge disaster, right? Nowadays, relief can come to that country because food can be shipped in relatively easily compared to the ancient world, but they didn't have ships like we have ships. They didn't have railroads and airplanes, and airlifts of emergency supplies like we have. If all the food was eaten, what a disaster. What else? Flies, hornets, mosquitoes, infestations of snakes or scorpions. For these, they would not sound the alarm, but they would cry out in prayer. Now, from the fact that crying out is, according to all opinions, a prayer recited with one's mouth, it follows that sounding an alarm must be with the shofar. And this Baraisa indicates that sounding the alarm with the shofar is the response to a serious situation, whereas the Anenu prayer is recited on less worrisome occasions. So interesting. These things that I just said are so awful. Yes, very bad, very dangerous, leads to the community crying out in prayer, but not considered as big an emergency as no rain, okay? And so all the crops won't grow and people are starting to, die of thirst. So the Gemara answers, this is a dispute between Tanaim. As we learned in the Mishna, for the following calamities, they sound the alarm even on Shabbos. Now we're talking about major, major danger. For a city that is surrounded by an enemy army, or in danger of being flooded by a river, or for a ship tossed about at sea, the community on the ship. So Rabbi Yosei said, an alarm may be sounded on Shabbos to summon help, but it may not be sounded for crying out to God. So interesting. Now the shofar is being used literally as an alarm, right? An alarm to warn people of immediate danger. Now the Gemara clarifies this case. With what do they sound the alarm? If we say with shofars, is the sounding of shofars permitted on Shabbos? Even when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, one must refrain from sounding the shofar. They say even because Rosh Hashanah is literally the day of sounding the shofar. That's what Rosh Hashanah is called in the Torah. It's the day of sounding the shofar. But when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos, we don't sound the shofar. So even when Rosh Hashanah occurs on Shabbos, one must refrain from sounding the shofar on that day. Rather, is it not the case that this is referring to the recitation of the Anenu prayer? And yet the Mishnah calls this recitation sounding the alarm. Conclude from this that there is at least one Tana, a sage of the Mishnah, who maintains that sounding the alarm is in fact performed by prayer, as claimed by Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel bar Shelas. The Gemara relates, during the years of Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, so Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, I'm pretty sure, was the grandson of Yehuda Hanasi, and he was also the Nasi, the head of the Sanhedrin. There was a trouble that afflicted the community. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya decreed 13 fasts, but he was not answered. He considered decreeing more fasts until they would be answered. And Rabbi Ami said to him that they said, one does not trouble the community excessively, and therefore you should not impose more than 13 fasts. And there we could get that insight that, if you're trying to rally the whole community to cry out to God, good, beautiful, you should do it. But you can't do it over and over and over again, or it will lose its urgency. For whatever reason, God is not answering those prayers. At a certain point, it's like, well, maybe we're not going to get God's mercy by continue to do the same thing. We should try something different. What we don't want to do is get the people to kind of inure themselves to this calling out as an emergency, and it won't feel that urgent anymore. And since it wasn't answered, it will sort of denigrate the position of their faith in their eyes. Now, Rabbi Abba, the son of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, said, when Rabbi Ami acted and issued this ruling to Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, he did so on his own authority, and it went against the majority opinion. Rather, Rabbi Chia bar Abba said that Rabbi Yochanan said, they taught only that the community observes a maximum of 13 fasts when they are praying for rain. However, with regard to other types of calamities, they do continue to fast until they are answered from heaven. So I was wrong. It's not that they're worried that the people will start to take the fasting less seriously. It's that it's only for rain that we have that series of up to 13 fasts and no more. For a different kind of calamity, they could declare more and more fasts. What is the difference? Rain, as we've seen, they're only going to keep having these fasts and beseeching God for rain while it's the rainy season. And if the rainy season passes and the rain hasn't come, we're not going to keep praying for rain because, in fact, rain out of season is considered a curse even after a long drought like that during the rainy season. But for a different calamity, like a plague, like people are dying of some kind of illness, yeah, they can keep doing these fasts until it ends. However, with regard to other types of calamities, they continue to fast until they are answered from heaven. And the Gemara comments, this halacha, this law, is also taught in a baraisa. When the sages said 3, and when they said 7, those series of fasts, 3, then 7, they spoke only concerning fasts for rain. However, with regard to other types of calamities, they continue to fast until they are answered. Now, the Gemara suggests, let us say that this baraisa is a conclusive refutation of the opinion of Rabbi Ami. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Ami could have said to you that this is a dispute between Tanaim. As it is taught in a baraisa, one does not decree more than 13 fasts on the community, as one does not trouble the community excessively. And this is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says this law is not for that reason. Rather, it is due to the fact that after 13 fasts, the time of the rainfall has already passed, and there is no reason to fast for rain after the rainy season has ended. The Gemara relates a story on a similar topic. The inhabitants of Nineveh. What is Nineveh? Nineveh is the ancient city that Jonah, the prophet, was sent to, right, to tell the people of Nineveh to mend their ways, and he didn't want to go and ended up in the belly of the whale. Where is Nineveh? So Nineveh is basically, it's almost the same as where the modern city of Mosul in Iraq is. So that's what we're talking about. So the inhabitants of Nineveh sent a question to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, presumably the Jewish community of Nineveh, sent a question to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. They said, people such as us who require rain even during the season of Tammuz, meaning the summer, right? In Israel, it doesn't rain in the summer, but over by Nineveh, it does rain in the summer, and they need that. So who require rain even during the season of Tammuz and who live in areas where rain falls all year round, what should we do when there is a drought during the summer? Are we likened to individuals and doing individual fasting, or are we likened to a community and are subject to the rules of communal fasts? And the Gemara explains the practical difference between these two options. Are we likened to individuals, and therefore we pray for rain in the blessing, who listens to prayer, right? That's the penultimate blessing of the Amidah before, bring back the temple to Zion, basically. But that's that area which is kind of a catch-all, blessing God who hears prayer. And that's the section where we can insert our personal prayers. So are they praying for rain during a drought in, a place where they need the rain year-round, like Nineveh? So do they, as individuals, add that request for rain in the section of the Amidah who listens to prayer? Or are we likened to a community and we pray for rain in the ninth blessing, which is where we say to God, please bless us with rain, right? Dew and rain, which we say during the rainy season of Israel, but could they add that blessing, requesting rain, even during the summer, right? In the ninth blessing. In the ninth blessing, the blessing of the years, that this should be a propitious year. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi sent his answer to them. You are likened to individuals, and therefore you pray for rain in the blessing who listens to prayer. They constitute a community in that region where they live, but when we're talking about communal prayer for rain, it's really talking about that special relationship between God and the Jewish people where God's eyes are on Israel, on the Holy Land itself. So it's when the children of Israel are living in the land of Israel, and really when the temple is standing, that they're at that really lofty spiritual level where God withholds the rain because the people sink down in their spiritual level and they need to get their level back up, as it were. Now the Gemara raises an objection from a Baraisa. Rabbi Yehuda said, when do the laws concerning the times during which the prayer for rain is recited apply? When do these laws apply? When the years, i.e. the climate, are as they ought to be, and the Jewish people are living in their land. However, nowadays, now this is the times of the Gemara, so this is 1,500 years ago. However, nowadays, when the Jewish people are dispersed around the world, and the climate is not always as it ought to be, so then all is in accordance with the year, i.e. with the local climate in question. All is in accordance with the particular time, and therefore one prays for rain in the blessing of the years as necessary for the local climate. And he said to him, you raise a contradiction from a Baraisa against Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi himself is a Tana, and consequently has the authority to dispute the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. But it's so interesting, right? So this idea, again, bringing it down, that, when there's a kingdom of Israel in existence, right? Now we have the modern state of Israel, and that's fantastic. But we're still not back to that same spiritual level we had when the Jews were living in Israel and the temple was standing, right? That's when really the behavior, the amount of rain was tied to the behavior of the people. Now, where we live in all kinds of lands around the world, and the weather, changes all the time, and there's climate change of various kinds. Not only modern times type of climate change, but the climate's always been changing. The bottom line is, if the people are facing a drought, and it's not that the rain is late in locally because it's late in Israel, or it's late in Israel because it's really, in other words, wherever you happen to live, if you're in trouble, right, the rain hasn't come or there's other calamities facing your region, cry out to God, right? Wherever you are, for whatever the reason, okay, cry out to God. What kind of crying out? Is it going to be a communal fast? That's something that, the sages in your region have to determine. But what is always appropriate is that in the daily prayer, in the section that, where we bless God for being the Almighty who hears our prayers, that we then add to our prayer, please God, spare us. We're in COVID. Please God, let COVID end. We should have that in our prayers. You're in a, God forbid, a place where there's riots. Please God, bring peace back to our city. You're in a place that's facing flood or hurricane or fire. Please God, end those calamities. Spare the people. Save the lives. Always appropriate to cry out to God. And the Gemara asks, so what legal conclusion, what halakhic conclusion was reached about this matter? And Rav Nachman said, one prays for rain in the blessing of the years in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rav Shesha said, one prays in the blessing who listens to prayer, as stated by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And the Gemara concludes, and the law is that if rain is required, when it is not the rainy season in the land of Israel, one prays for rain in the blessing who listens to prayer. That's always safe. Whatever you need, pray for it in the section of God who hears prayer. The Mishna, new subject. The Mishna taught on Monday they open the stores a little at nightfall, and on Thursday they are permitted to open the stores all day in deference to Shabbos. So a dilemma was raised before the sages. How is this taught? I.e., what is the meaning of this ruling? Does it mean that on Monday the store owners open their doors a little at nightfall, and on Thursday they likewise open their doors just a little? And on Thursday, they likewise open their doors just a little, but they do so all day in deference to Shabbos. Or perhaps the Mishnah means that on Monday they open their doors a little, but all day, and on Thursday they open their doors wide the entire day. I mean, it's so funny, but the idea is there's a community's having communal fast. It's one of those series of fasts. It's going to be Monday, Thursday, Monday. So on Monday, they have to open their doors a little, so that people have what food to break the fast with on Monday night. On Thursday, they have to open the stores more because people need to shop for Shabbos, for their Friday night dinner and Saturday lunch. But when it says open their doors a little, what does that mean? Just for a few hours, or literally just, crack open the door to show that we don't throw the doors open wide because the community is in a time of self-reflection. We bring down our spirits. We're not going to be acting in a normal, cheerful, joyful manner because the whole community is facing a crisis and we should all be more somber. And one way to express that is that literally the stores don't throw their doors wide open. They kind of crack open the doors. It's like a visual reminder. Is that what it means? And the Gemara answers, come and hear a resolution of this dilemma, as it was taught in a Baraisa. On Monday, they open their doors a little until the evening, and on Thursday they open them the entire day in deference to Shabbos. If one's shop had two entrances, he opens one entrance and he locks the other, thereby demonstrating that his store is not open in the normal manner. It's sort of like flying the flags at half-mast. If he had a platform opposite his entrance, which conceals the door to his store, so he may open in his usual manner without concern, as it is prohibited to open one's store not due to work, but only so that it not appear as though people are eating and drinking on this day. People can shop for food for the break fast or for Shabbos, but they can't be eating. It's a fast day. And the Mishnah taught, if these fasts have passed and they have not been answered, so then they decrease their engagement in business negotiations and in building and planting. And it was taught in the Tosefta, Megillah 5:2, building means joyful building, not building in general. Likewise, planting means joyful planting, not all planting in general. And the Tosefta elaborates, what is joyful building? This refers to one who builds a wedding chamber for his child. It was customary upon the marriage of a son to build him a small house where the marriage feast was held and where the newlywed couple would live for a certain period of time. What is joyful planting? This is referring to one who plants a splendid royal garden that does not serve practical purposes but is only for ornamentation. So these are the kinds of joyful activities that we don't want to be engaged in during a communal fast day. And the Mishnah further taught that they decrease greetings between one another. And the sages taught Chaverim, members of a group dedicated to the precise observance of the commandments, do not extend greetings between each other at all. Amei haaretz, meaning ignorant ones, common uneducated people, who extend greetings to Chaverim do so unaware that this is inappropriate. The Chaverim answer them in an undertone and in a solemn manner, and Chaverim wrap themselves and sit as mourners and like as if they were ostracized, like people who have been rebuked by God until they are shown mercy from heaven. Right? So when that drought is getting worse and worse, it's intensifying, the educated people, the Torah scholars, have to literally sit there like mourners, like somebody who's lost a close relative, to give a visual signal to the rest of the population that we're in trouble, guys. All of you are just going on about your affairs because you don't realize how bad the problem is. But take it as take our word for it that the rains are really late and we are, in a state of mourning and self-affliction to really try to beseech God's mercy. And you should see that we're doing that and start praying, joining us in praying to God for mercy. Rabbi Elazar said, an important person is permitted to fall on his face and humiliate himself in front of the community only if he is certain that he will be answered like Joshua, the son of Nun, as it is stated, and the Lord said to Joshua, get you up, why are you fallen on your face? That's Joshua 7:10. And one who is not absolutely certain that he will be answered may not fall on his face in public, as if he is unanswered, he will become an object of derision, right? And who are these important people? They're the Torah scholars and leaders of the community. So they shouldn't act in such a way that they totally kind of demean themselves in seeking God's mercy for the community if it's going to sort of demean the honor of their office as Torah leaders of the community. And who's so sure that God is going to answer their particular prayers? Meaning, so nobody should do that, right? And this is like that old joke. That like a community is facing a problem, and so the rabbi of the synagogue says, Lord, I'm nothing but dust and ashes, hear our prayer. And the president of the synagogue says, Lord, I am nothing but dust and ashes, hear our prayer. And in the back of the room, like the guy cleaning up, the janitor is so moved by the piety of the rabbi and the president, that he cries out, Lord, Lord, I am nothing but dust and ashes, hear our prayer. And then the president elbows the rabbi and he says, oh, look over there, look who thinks he's nothing. if you get it. And so this idea, right, is not everybody has the stature to debase themselves properly. However, don't go around attracting attention to yourself as somebody who's falling on his face in prayer, right? And like going nuts with afflicting themselves in a public way. Don't do that unless you really are sure that you have God's ear and he's going to answer the prayer. And Rabbi Elazar said, an important person is, right, a chashuv person, right? So that word, an important person, a prominent person. So a chashuv person is permitted to gird himself in sackcloth as a sign of mourning and to pray for mercy only if he is certain that he will be answered like Jehoram, the son of Ahav, as it is stated, and it came to pass, this is 2 Kings 6:30, and it came to pass when the king heard the words of the woman that he ripped his clothes, and now he was passing by upon the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth within upon his flesh. Although he was wicked, Jehoram was later answered, and the suffering of the Jews was alleviated. And Rabbi Elazar further said, not all are worthy to petition God by ripping their garments, and not all are worthy of falling on their faces in times of trouble. And Moses and Aaron were worthy of petitioning God by falling on their faces. Whereas their students, Joshua and Caleb, prayed only by ripping their garments. And the Gemara elaborates, Moses and Aaron petitioned God by falling on their faces. As it is written, then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces. Numbers 14:5. Joshua and Caleb prayed by ripping their garments, as it is written in the next verse, and Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were of those who spied out the land, rent their garments. Numbers 14:6. So Rabbi Zera strongly objects to this interpretation, and some say it was Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani who objected. Had the verse written only Joshua and Caleb, the meaning would be, as you said, that Moses and Aaron fell on their faces, whereas Joshua and Caleb only ripped their garments. However, now that it is written, and Joshua, it is possible that the connecting word and indicates that Moses and Aaron merely fell upon their faces, while Joshua and Caleb did both this and that. They fell on their faces and they ripped their garments. And Rabbi Elazar further said, not all dignitaries will worship God in the Messianic age by rising, and not all will do so by bowing. Rather, kings will serve God by rising, and ministers by bowing. And the Gemara elaborates, king by rising, as it is written, thus says the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, his Holy One, to he who is despised of men, who is abhorred of nations, to a servant of rulers, kings shall see and arise. Right? They will stand in the presence of the Lord, and ministers by bowing, as it is written in the same verse, ministers and they shall bow. And Rabbi Zera strongly objects to this interpretation, and some say it was Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani who objected. Had the verse written, and ministers shall bow, the meaning would have been, as you said. However, now that it is written, ministers and they shall bow, this indicates the ministers will do this and that. They will both arise and bow. And finally, I'm almost done, so questions or comments, I'm really at the end. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzhak said, I too say a similar idea. Not all are fit for light, and not all are fit for gladness. The righteous are fit to be rewarded with light, and the upright are fit to be rewarded with gladness. The righteous are fit to be rewarded with light. As it is written, Or tsarua latzadik, light is sown for the righteous. Psalm 97. And the upright are fit to be rewarded with gladness, as it is written, Ula yishrei lev simcha, and gladness for the upright of heart. A little bit unclear what is the practical meaning of that, but I do love this idea. I mean, what is our world made of? Light. God said in the beginning, let there be light. And that really is the fundamental creation, right? Before that, there was nothing of a physical universe. It was just God and his spiritual world. And then the first thing that materialized, right, in a physical world was light. And so, for thousands of years, people were like, well, light is not really a thing. It's not matter. It's not stuff. It was just, the light. And then eventually stuff came in and we could see it because there was light. But in the 20th century, Albert Einstein informed us that no, light and, matter are the same thing. It's all made of the same stuff, right? So God's light is the stuff of the universe. And if you say that line, light is sown for the righteous, what it might mean is this entire universe was created so that there would be a place where people could act righteously, which gives God a lot of joy, right? If they're just following God's orders, they're not really making that choice because they're overwhelmed by the presence of God. But God made a world where God's presence is hidden, and it's a setting where we have the choice to act righteously. And if we do, it gives God joy. And that's why God made light, meaning God made this universe so that people would have a place to be righteous. All right, let's go to questions and comments. Whew. Okay. Rick Davis, is sounding the shofar considered a prayer in itself? Rick, that's such a good question. And I think the answer is yes, but now it's just my opinion. I mean, the Torah refers to the shofar as Rosh Hashanah, right? That's the day of sounding the shofar. And we saw when we were reading Tractate Rosh Hashanah that if you had a choice to go to a place where people pray properly, or a place where they blow the shofar, and you couldn't go to both, so on Rosh Hashanah you should go where they're blowing the shofar. If it was only to hear the shofar being blown, I mean, why would they say that? But I think that the shofar is this like deep, deep, deep sort of primordial connection to the soul, where the soul gets that when we're blowing the shofar, it is a form of prayer. That's my answer. That's not I'm not quoting a rabbi on that. That's my answer. Shandora. They just recently had a plague of scorpions in Egypt. Due to a flood, they started swarming and stinging everyone. Over 500 stung, but very few deaths. Thank God. Thank God. Right, and we can see, sometimes it's like these plagues generate more plagues, right? I mean, there's no question that you have a flood that's going to bring all kinds of filth, up into all the homes, etc. After the waters recede, now there is an opportunity for, kinds of insects, in this case, scorpions, as you said, but it could also bring mosquitoes, which bring malaria. I mean, there are people around the world at any time who are really up against it. And, may they be spared, and may all these calamities end soon for everyone in harm's way. Yosef, is there any discussion by the sages about individuals choosing to fast for themselves and their own families and not on behalf of the entire Jewish nation? Well, yes, right? So we had that a few days ago, that somebody might undertake a fast as an atonement because they realize that they've made a transgression. Now, recall that the sages have very mixed feelings about taking on an affliction and a fast unnecessarily, meaning that it's optional, right? So if you're seeking to elevate your spirituality and you're taking that very seriously, so then you can undertake an individual fast. Would you fast, for example, because someone is ill? I don't think so. I think it's, you fast because you're examining your own deeds or the needs of the community, and it requires a fast. But again, it's connected to that idea that God has sent that calamity because the community is transgressing, right? Because the spiritual level has fallen. But as we also saw outside of Israel, and even in Israel today, because the modern state of Israel is not the equivalent of when the people were living in Israel, the temple was standing, and it's really, we were fulfilling God's will by living there. We're still waiting for this exile to end and all the Jews to be brought to Israel. So in modern times, as the sages said, it goes by what's happening locally, right? And if the weather is weird anyway, we can't assume that God is sending a punishment to us because we've misbehaved. We can resolve to do better anyway, because we always know that no matter what's going on in the world, we could do better, right? We could do better. As individuals, we could do better. As communities, we could do better. As nations, we could do better. So it's good to examine our deeds, but taking on a fast, that's a big step. What we can always do is pray, right? So whenever we're facing difficulties, pray, talk to God in your own language, ask for mercy, ask for healing, ask for livelihood. It is always appropriate to pray. Julie, what is the best way to fast? Food or something we love? I guess you're saying if you're going to undertake one of these optional fasts, I think a fast is a fast, right? So no eating during the daytime. But again, taking on fast days it's quite extreme. It's problematic, right? And then there's lots of opinions that you shouldn't do it. It's possible. It's problematic. Saying I'm going to deny myself, something that is a permitted pleasure, but which does me no good. It's like legally permitted, but I'm overeating. I'm carrying extra weight. I'm endangering my life by being too fat. Maybe my kids are going to lose me because I'm not taking care of my health. And, now that I feel like I've reached an age, this is just an example that I'm making up, but saying you're going to do better, not only, in the way you treat others or giving to charity, but also taking care of your health. And you're going to deny yourself a pleasure so that you can increase your health. I think that's a very beautiful form of behavior, especially if you're doing it, so that your loved ones won't be deprived of you, right? That's a very beautiful thing to do. I remember that, my father, it's not because my father, used to drive so fast. He's actually quite a cautious driver most of the time. But I remember when I was a kid, I was like 6 years old, and he had this like little magnet in his car on the dashboard. We were just fresh immigrants from Chile living in the United States, so it was in Spanish. And it was like a picture of the family and a little traffic light and the phrase, no corras, papa, right? Don't rush, dad. Don't speed, dad. Right? And obviously it's that same idea. Don't endanger your life because people are depending on you, right? And so often we forget, it's not only in the case of a provider for a family, but we all live in a network of relationships. And we all have a personal mission in this world. So you got to take care of yourself so that you're here and able to perform your mission, if at all possible. All right, that's what I've got for us today. Sorry about the interruption that caused us to sort of split the video today. It was a silver alert here in Los Angeles and it cut off the feed. But we're back and we finished the show. With God's help, we'll be together tomorrow night, Saturday, about an hour after Shabbos ends here in LA, probably about 6 o'clock. Now Shabbos ends so early. And please support Accidental Talmudists. It's our annual campaign. All donations doubled and help us build the app. Donate.accidentaltalmudist.org. Good Shabbos.